Beautiful people, children of God, praise God every day in every way. All right, we're here with the second installment of Bible study. I am Adrian Howard from Transformation AME Zion Church. And the first installment we did on Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, this is in the Bible, chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. And today we will continue on in the book of Proverbs. It's kind of in the middle of the Christian Bible. If you want to know what Proverbs is, it's a section of wisdom. You got 4 books there, definitely, that most scholars agree are the books of wisdom: Job, Psalms, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. All right. Solomon, for all we know, might have put all 4 books together. We definitely know he put Psalms together for his father David, written mostly by David, poems and songs, and then and obviously Proverbs and Ecclesiastes is also written by Solomon. Job, some people think Solomon might have wrote it. They really don't know who put it out there, but the story of Job has been around it's like the oldest story in the Bible, because he was around Abraham's time. He might be a little older than Abraham. So here we are in verse 7, and it talks about the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and fools despite wisdom and instruction. And I believe Solomon took that from Job chapter 28, which is my favorite verse in the Bible, coming behind the verse my mama gave me, which is the Gospel of John in the New Testament, chapter 3, verse 16, known as John 3:16 to most people. All right, but what God gave me for myself, my own self, from Him to me, was Job 28:28. That summed up the whole Bible to me and how I should live my life. And it goes, "And unto man, he said, the fear of the Lord is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding." And so basically it says, turn away from evil and turn to the Lord for all things. It's a good type of fear they're talking about. This fear that's going to take you everywhere you need to be with no worries. This kind of fear. And here in verse 7 of Proverbs chapter 1, we're talking about that good type of fear. It's the beginning of knowledge. And I want to just break this down for a moment. The beginning of knowledge. You can say, and this is what God has given to me to understand this so much better. The beginning of knowledge, just like the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of knowledge is the beginning of knowing the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, right? So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowing the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowing God. See, there's a difference between beginning and ending. Obviously, we who are Christians and have heard the term that God is the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. We want to be in that knowing God. We want to be in that middle section going towards the end with God. It's not the beginning. Believing is the beginning. It's wonderful. Believing is wonderful. Believing is outstanding. Believing is amazing. But it's the beginning. The beginning is believing. Knowing God is further down the road from believing. You go from believing to knowing. Now, and I tell you it's wisdom because we know Abraham is the father of faith. And we know that when you look at Abraham's story, they talk about he knew God. He believed God. It's faith is involved. So we have a beginning, start of faith when we're utilizing our faith. And then the more that we utilize it, the more training we get, the deeper we get, the more we know our faith. And when you know something, no one can persuade you anything in any other way. They can't persuade you or move you to the right or the left. When you know for sure, when you do your studies and you know what you know it. No one can take it away from you. So when our people get that knowledge and we know it, we know God, we're not worried. We don't fear a thing. And see, when you don't fear a thing, you don't lie. There's no reason to lie when you're not afraid. The devil tries to trip us up with lies. He tries to get us to fear something else and not God. But when we fear God, we're not afraid. And you can do amazing things in this way. All right? So I want to take that on. I want you to understand the beginning is like believing, which is beautiful. And that's, but you want to get to knowing God. All right? So it's the beginning of knowing God. So your walk of faith will take you to knowing God. So pray about what I'm saying. Pray about everything that you can. I want to go on and move on to the foolish parts. There are 3 types of fools in the Bible. And the Hebrew words for fools, I have some Hebrew words here. 3 different types of fools that they talk about. Now, there's many other kind of fools in the Bible, and there's many kind of fools that we run into with different angles, but they generally are summed up under these 3 categories of this kind of foolishness. And there's steps to foolishness, but this kind of foolishness in verse 7 here in Proverbs chapter 1 is called evil, and that's spelled E-W-I-Y-L. E-W-I-Y-L. The Hebrew pronunciation is something like evil. It almost sounds like evil, but it's like pronounced E-H-V-E-E-H. Ephel. So, and then we have another type that's called Kesil. K-E-S-I-Y-L. And the last type of fool is Naval or Naval. All right, and that's N-A-B-A-L. All right, so the first type of fool is a self-sufficient fool, and it detests wisdom, advice, and correction. See, we ought to love correction. Here in Proverbs, they tell you, many times Solomon tells you to love correction. It's okay to get things wrong if you get it wrong and you can learn from it, but be willing to learn from it. God is always showing me, bringing me, making me more humble. If I step out of line, step out of place. Not too long ago, I was a self-sufficient fool. We were in Sunday school or preparing for our Sunday school filming and presentation, and I spoke out of turn, and I'm correcting a good reverend from Scott AME as she was doing her thing as she was instructed, and I didn't want her to get things wrong, and I didn't want her to waste her beautiful, precious breath. But I spoke out of turn. I was wrong. Why? Because I didn't have my list that the Reverend Dr. Jones had prepared for us to go by, my script, when my turn is and what chapter. And I just remembered, I leaned on my own understanding. And I just remembered the one verse, the one chapter and verse, but not all the verses that was supposed to be read. And I spoke out of turn. I was that kind of fool. I was evil. I was self-sufficient. And only a few seconds later, my son had brought me the thing. If I would have just waited for my son to bring it to me, to go by the script, I wouldn't have had to be humbled that way. But they got a blessing out of it because I asked God to bless her and everyone else 2 and 3 times more for my stubbornness, for my foolishness. All right? The second type of fool is Kesil, K-E-S-I-Y-L. And this kind of fool is not willing to change. They're proud. They treat righteousness with ridicule and contempt. They're not open to correction. You can find that in Proverbs chapter 9 verses 7 through 8, or chapter 13 verse 1, or chapter 15 verse 12. They're not open to correction, or they're unable to learn. You can find that in Proverbs chapter 14 verse 6 as well. They're smug and overconfident. Their increases in stubbornness. They double down on this stuff. These people delight in evil conduct. You got to be careful of these kind of people. They double down on it. We know and we hear and we see sometimes these kind of people that double down on foolishness. That's the second stage. It's very bad. And they delight in evil. They divide things. They believe in division. All right? Watch out for that kind of fool. All right? You can find that in Proverbs chapter 1 verse 22, where they mention this. So the Hebrew word is kesel. And the third type we can find in Proverbs chapter 17 verse 7, and that's Naval. Naval, we can be reminded of Naval was a farmer type person who owned a business during David's come up before he grabbed the kingdom, and he was with his 30 wise men, and they were hungry. They've been protecting the land in that area where Naval's farmers and his staff was, but they were hungry, so they sent some messages. David sent some messages with delightful words to Naval and just asked for a bite to eat. But Naval, he was that worst kind of stubbornness, worst kind of fool. He didn't want to feed David. He was like, who's David? I don't even know if you really are David. And who are you anyway, even if you are David, that I should feed you, basically. I'm just paraphrasing all this stuff, making it sound the way I would like it to sound. So, but he ended up dying because he didn't want to feed David. His wife, Abigail, decided to be a peacemaker, but after she died, David heard the word and came back and married her. And they had a beautiful son. If you look in Chronicles, you can find you can find that they had a son named Chileab, also known as Daniel, but not the prophet Daniel, but like a nickname Daniel. But look out, he walked as a perfect man. He died, but he was a perfect type of son, and the kind of son you really would want to have. Probably if Solomon wasn't going to be king, he would probably be king. He was the second born. All right, you never heard any words about him, bad or good or anything. But if you look in deeper studies, it was good. That's how you want a good reputation. But Naval, I think Solomon was using this as a little jab because he took stabs at his father. So now it's a word of the worst kind of fool. All right, and that's irreligious. This is the irreligious of fools. One who curses God and one who denies God's existence. All right, you can find this also in Job. Chapter 2 verses 9 and 10. You can go to Psalms 14 verse 1 and Isaiah chapter 32 verse 6. That's the third kind of fool. It's the worst kind of fool. You don't want to go against a man of God or a woman of God. That's stupid in itself. It's not a wise choice. Look up the word stupid. It's not a wise act, a wise decision. All right? It's foolishness. So, be good. Watch what you say. Love God in all his ways and all his people. So that's pretty much it for today. Irreligious.